Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me weekly as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. At 14, Anthony Patrick Manieri saved up enough money to buy his first camera. What started off as a hobby taking pictures soon became a profession. With a successful career in media spanning more than 3 decades, Anthony's sought-after shots have graced the pages of some of the most popular fashion and wedding magazines worldwide. In recent years, Anthony has focused his lens on a passion project to undo the harm caused by the media in depicting a one-dimensional view of the male form. Arrested Movement is the name of his internationally acclaimed portrait series, which aims to shatter the mold of the perfect adonis, with his subjects bearing all for the camera while showcasing the beauty and diversity of men's bodies. Anthony is here to discuss his work and the importance of men's body positivity. It's a pleasure to welcome professional photographer Anthony Patrick Manieri to the show. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm well, thank you.
What attracted you to the camera at 14 years old?
I've always been artistic, so I was painting or drawing from an early age, like 3, 4. And I always wanted to be an animator. I remember watching The Streets of San Francisco. Do you remember that show?
I totally do. My mother had a crush on Michael Douglas.
Yeah. I think everyone had a crush on Michael Douglas. He was a handsome man. There was one particular episode where I think it was like a fake fashion photographer shoot with a model, and I thought, oh, I was really drawn to that. And then they were in the dark room with the photographer as they were developing some images, waiting for the villain to come out on the images. And I remember thinking in my head, that's what I want to do. Painting, I loved painting, I loved drawing, but photography was instant for me. And I really was drawn to that. And then 13, 14, I saved up my summer school money and walked into a store with my dad and put the money on the counter and said, what can I buy with this? Give me the best camera that I could buy with this. And at that point, from there on, I just, anybody would stand in front of my camera, friends, cousins would take their photos. And it just kind of evolved from there.
And you're self-taught, eh?
Self-taught, yeah.
That's really impressive. And for people who don't know the body of your work, you are really accomplished. Your pictures have been featured in Martha Stewart Wedding, Brides Magazine, Esquire, Out Magazine, Instinct, Vogue Italia, just to name a few. Plus, you had an exhibit at London's Victoria and Albert Museum. Your images have been on many covers, editorials, and coffee table books. That's pretty big time.
Thanks. So, I don't pump myself up that way, so I never really think like that. But as far as the Victoria and Albert Museum, I was part of the first major group show about men. And it was a retrospective of men from the Renaissance to present day and how fashion and masculinity evolved. So they reached out in 2021 and asked if they could have part of my Arrested Movement series included in the show. So at first I thought it was a joke. And then I was like, okay. And then the press release came out and I started to have a little bit of an anxiety because my name was wedged in between like Jean-Paul Gaultier and another artist that was also going to be there. And I thought, okay, this is happening. So I guess I am. It doesn't feel that way because once I'm done with something, I literally it's behind me and I just move on to the next thing. So if that makes any sense.
And for much of your career, you were and are a renowned wedding photographer. How did you switch from focusing your energy on shooting the perfect wedding day to reframing the concept of the perfect male body?
Well, see, I fell into wedding photography through a friend of mine. I was introduced to a photographer, and he was a great photographer, really, really great. And I learned a lot from him. And then I fell into wedding photography. It's not something I ever wanted to do. I wanted to go to New York and be Annie Leibovitz or Richard Avedon. And one thing led to another, and would do a wedding, and then the money was good, and then somebody I like, oh, I really like these photos, and it was a snowball effect, and the next thing you know, I had a wedding studio, and that did really well for me because I was, clients, I was hitting a certain percentage of clientele, like the one percenters ish, like really high end weddings, and I was being flown, to Bali and Paris for a dress fitting, and it was wonderful, and I was grateful for the experience. But my love was always fashion photography. Something a little bit more artistic, and not that I didn't bring artisticness to weddings, which is why I think I stood out initially. But I've always done fashion, had a love for food photography as well. But anything working with people, I found I excelled at. I loved the interaction of being with someone and having conversations or a group of people. And because I'm self-taught, I used to take any spare change I had and I would buy a Vogue magazine. So I would just like really, like front to cover, I would just inspect this magazine and look how the models were posing and how that was photographed. And that's technically how I taught myself that through also, later gaining experience with the photographer that I was assisting. So I'd always dip my foot back into fashion, and I did that in the 90s for a while. And then weddings kind of started, people were asking me to shoot their weddings, and then that happened. And I always knew that I would go back to being more in the art world, I guess. I do some commercial photography sometimes as well. Just working with people is what I really love doing. Photographing people.
So, what was the shift from wedding photography to doing? And I know that you have that initial background in fashion photography, but there was a shift, there was a pivot that you made to shoot these perfect days for couples that
Mm.
are getting married to really examining the male form, right? So, what was the impetus for that?
A number of years ago, my family all started to become sick. So started with my sister. My father was much older than my mother, and he was declining, and my sister became ill, and my responsibilities started to change as far as what priorities and responsibilities started to change. So I had to be at work less so I could be at hospital visits or doctor visits more. That started to become a dark period in my life. So within about a 6 month period, a lot shifted. I feel like it kind of left me with a little bit of PTSD, to be honest with you, like looking back. I remember this, it was not an aha moment per se, but a slight aha moment. I was in a pharmacy waiting to fill some prescription for one of the three individuals in my family. And they say, take 10, 15 minutes and be back. So I would walk the store and I would always gravitate towards the magazine section because it's visual, it's photography. And I remember specifically that one time, I think I was in three or four different magazines and I might have been on a cover. If we had flashback 2 years before that, and if that was happening, I'd be like, look, everybody, I'm so excited. But that moment, I was just like, well, I'm here, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there. I'm like, and none of it made me happy. It didn't bring me, not that it didn't bring me joy. It wasn't as important as I once made it out to be. And so I knew something was shifting then for me. So after my father passed, I sold my studio and I gave up photography. And I threw myself into spirituality and meditation, mindful meditation. I'm a Reiki master. I just wanted to learn what energy was. And every time I would go to a meditation, I'd meet new people and, they'd be happy. And the next thing you know, I'm started studying Kabbalah. And I was looking for happiness. I was looking for joy because the studio that I had and what I was doing and where I was on the a hierarchy scale of things in the industry of what I was doing anyway, wasn't bringing, it didn't hold the same value to me. When I sold it, it left such a bad taste in my mouth that I sold it. I was never a drinker. I wasn't happy, so I didn't want to necessarily turn to drugs per se. And a friend of mine invited me to a group meditation, and I went, and I really liked it. And that's when I threw myself into it. It was like, okay, well, what else can I learn? What else can I do? What else can make me happy? Because once you still your mind and you have some connection to source, it's a drug in itself almost. It's like, wow, that's amazing. That's all I wanted to talk about. I was like, this is great. Hey guys, did you do this? And so I gave up photography and I started studying osteopathy because I just wanted to help people. At that point, I just wanted to help people. I didn't want to be that creative person anymore. I just with experiences with my family. And that was another thing too. I was learning different healing modalities. So not as to be as a profession, but to help my family. So if I'm in the emergency room, I knew a way to move their body in a certain way that would calm their nervous system down and things like that, right? So that was the intention. So I studied osteopathy for maybe a semester, and I really enjoyed it, but I found it a little difficult financially. And an old friend of mine pulled me inside and said, these were her exact words. She's like, okay, I'm going to talk to you in a way that a gay man would understand. I said, okay. Whitney Houston and Celine Dion were both given a gift from Source, from God. And she said, Celine Dion swam with the flow. She's like, Whitney Houston swam against the flow. And she's like, don't swim against it. She was like, swim with the flow. She was, you were given a gift. You need to do that. And the next day I called the school and I asked for my money back, and I took myself and I flew to England. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew some people there, and I had almost like an open house where I rented the studio for a day and people were coming in. And there was the last gentleman of the day. He was great. He was an actor. And because it was like one of my first trips to London shooting for myself, I didn't bring my laptop with me, so I wasn't tethering anything to a laptop because normally when you're on a set with a client, that's what you tend to do, so the client can see what's happening if we need to make adjustments or things like that. So I just had my camera and I had my digital CF cards with me, and I literally had maybe 14 shots left on this card, and that was it. And the day was done, and then I was, go off to my hotel and so this last gentleman came in and he was doing his thing and he happened to jump in the air. Immediately, I thought of a Richard Avedon Versace ad campaign from the early 90s of a male supermodel, Marcus Schenkenberg was his name. And it's a famous shot. He's jumping in the air and he's got a tie around his neck or he's got a tie in his hand. And so when this gentleman did this jump, I said, that's what it reminded me of. And he was clothed. And I said, would you mind doing that again? But would you mind doing it nude? He's like, oh, okay. So he did, and literally, like I said, I had 13 shots left. So I filled the card, and that was it. It was just a one-off. And when I got back, I edited it and I sent it off to him. The picture seemed to go viral. He posted it. It was something that I would never post. It was just it was an afterthought, really. And the photo went viral. I knew that people were getting a response from this image. So that was the catalyst of this project. And at the same time, a friend of mine who's also a photographer, who also deals with mostly with weddings, we were complaining to each other that we were always working for clients and never really for ourselves. And I thought, interesting, this photo. So I used it as a catalyst, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to use this as a starting point, and I'll put a call out and maybe shoot another 15, but maybe like another 10, 15 guys, random guys, and husky or bigger guys. Because the gentleman, the initial photo, he's a husky, hairy bear, a bit of a belly. So I thought I would photograph about 10, 15 other men with similar builds and maybe have a little gallery show somewhere under the guise of body positivity for men. That was the initial thought.
I want to get back to something that you said, and it's about flow. So, when your friend said you need to get back into the flow or get into the flow of the universe or whatever she said to you, was that the indicator for you to get back into photography?
Yes.
Okay. And so essentially your journey of spiritual exploration was really about connecting with yourself, working through whatever it is that you were working through at the time and taking care of family members, ailing family members, and also tending to yourself, your needs. And from that, you were able to approach your photography from a different perspective. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would say that. More empathy for sure.
And that was really the birth of Arrested Movement.
Hmm.
How would you describe Arrested Movement?
And it's an inclusive, what I say, it's an inclusive photo series and awareness initiative for men. Growing up, I'm half Italian, half Irish descent. So I was always the tallest, fairest, blue-eyed kid in pretty much an all Italian neighborhood and Italian school. And even within my family, I mean, I always felt I was too Italian for my Irish side and too Irish for my Italian side. I felt like I never, ever really fit in. But that was just in my head because I didn't look like my cousins. I didn't look like my friends who were olive complexion, brown eyes, genetically thin, where I am a big, thick guy. And I've always been that. But in my head, I'm thinking I should have always been a size 32. That was always in my head. So I always had this lack of confidence around my physical appearance growing up. As you grow older, you tend to leave some of that behind, for me anyway. When I was struggling with it and I would look online, or I would look for different places or where I could find information about men dealing with body image, there was next to nothing. Through the course of starting to photograph Arrested Movement, everything just kind of grew organically. So part of what I brought into Arrested Movement was when the topic of body positivity or body acceptance is ever discussed in the media, men are never included. It's always about women. And the women fought for that place. Like they brought that conversation forward where we haven't because we were just taught not to, or, we men just, you don't want to look like a sissy, so you just keep quiet and you move forward. So I wanted to bring men into the conversation of body positivity when it's ever discussed. And I wanted there to be a complete range, which is what I found on my first shoot was I was expecting 10 or 15 husky guys to walk in, and I was getting an array of different body types. Somebody who's genetically underweight, who's always trying to put on weight. I'm like, oh, you obviously struggle with your appearance as much as I would struggle with my appearance. So that was the whole genesis of Arrested Movement.
It's a bit of a paradox, right? Because, at the same time as you say that men have little visibility in mainstream discussions about body positivity, I think it would be fair to say that the vast majority of the editors out there are men and they have artistic control.
Mm.
So, how can it be that men's needs are not being met in that context?
Well, I think in media, it's always been women in ads and in commercials. The majority of anyone that you're seeing is a woman. And then we would just be the trophy in the background, or, we're cutting the grass. And so I think it was always female centered, I would think. And it's a concept or an ideology that's been kept, I think, from the 20s since Hollywood started. And then that it overflowed into marketing and media. So it's just been part of the infrastructure of things. When you go through a magazine, you're going to see really thin, beautiful women and really fit men because people are selling you the dream. It's all about selling you the dream. But the effect it's had on society, it's made some people sick that they think they need to look like that. That was me as a young person. But I don't look like that. I will never look like that. Even at my thinnest that I could ever be, I personally will never fit into a size 36 pant. But in my head for years, that wasn't good enough. I needed to be a size 32. So it's a whole mind fuck. But I wanted to bring part of this to the conversation, the overall conversation around body positivity and acceptance. But I also wanted men who might be struggling with it, and they could be young men, they could be older men, and they're seeing bodies that look very much like them, and they're photographed really, really beautifully. Well, I know because I've received a lot of messages from men over the years thanking me for providing this platform and making it okay.
And you're right. I mean, men do struggle with negative body image. I was looking at stats. There is an online publication called The Conversation. I think that these stats are from the UK actually. They say that 30 to 40% of men worry about their weight, and up to 85% are concerned about their muscularity. In addition to issues with self esteem, some men develop anxiety and depression, with 1 in 10 men experiencing suicidal thoughts and 4% resorting to self harm. Some develop eating disorders, muscle dysmorphia, and exercise addiction, which might include steroid use. It also mentions in this article that the influence of mass media with idealized images of men's bodies appears to be a driving factor, and the fallout from the pandemic seems to have exacerbated the issue. So, when you hear these stats, what comes to mind for you?
I think we're at a boiling point. Everything is being heightened, and social media is such a juggernaut that people curate their pages and their lives on social media, and you have like with these influencers or these celebrities, and people look at them and they want that. So I think again, it took me a long time to realize that, even though Brad Pitt is a really good-looking man, I'm never going to be Brad Pitt. I don't look like Brad Pitt. I don't, my body genetically isn't made like that. Like my body and your body are completely different. It definitely affects the minds of people. It's like for younger men who are seeing these gorgeous looking men with beautiful jacked bodies. Again, they'll have the body, they'll have the car, they'll have the house. I think that's what runs through a lot of people's heads. They want to achieve the unattainable and then go through terrible ways of achieving it. I mean, one stat I had seen that men commit suicide 4 times more than women do. That's quite telling. It's just a sickness. It's social media. It's a great thing initially, but I don't think it is a good thing either.
Let's talk about your project a little bit
Sure.
more. What I mentioned earlier and what you've stated is that Arrested Movement is really about raising awareness on men's body image and to reframe what we see as acceptable images of the male form. Why was it important for you to shoot your subjects in the nude?
Well, that's a good question. So the initial photograph that I used as the catalyst was nude because of my explanation earlier that it reminded me of an old Versace campaign. So the model was nude, he had a tie, and so when I made that connection, we did it, and that was it. I shot the photo and off it went, but it became something else that I said, okay, because I'm using it as a catalyst at this point, they'll be nude. But I photographed these men in a plain studio with a white silo background with one light. So it's almost like a spotlight on a stage. And I wanted everyone to be photographed the same way, not necessarily move their positioning or how they move their bodies the same way, but just everyone had an equal platform to be photographed. And I would give them direction and they would move around. But I also, before I did the first shoot after the initial photograph, I contemplated that. Do they wear underwear? Do they wear shorts? Do they? I wanted everyone to be, so if it was going to be underwear, it would be all white jockey underwear or boxers. I mean, I wanted everything to be the same so that not one person stood out more than the other. But photographing them in the nude with nothing behind them and nothing on, you can't really hide your body from that. So everything is just, it's out there, whether you're self-conscious about your love handles or your calves or your ankles, or it could be, it's a number of things. They couldn't hide behind it. So it was them. And at that point, there were certain times where people got it and stepped really out of their box and they would just move. And that was the pretense. I didn't want anything to hide them. I didn't want to have any of that.
You made a conscious choice not only for your models to be nude, but
Mhm.
also to shoot in black and white. Why is that?
When I was contemplating jockeys, boxers, jeans with suspend, whatever it was, I thought if I've been to enough gay bars that when you walk in their front door, there's a lot of little posters saying, Tuesday nights, it's this, and they're usually in a jock and it's in color. And mind you, it's meant to be sexualized, but I don't want people to look at these images and sexualize them. So I thought black and white instead of color. I guess subconsciously I felt like it would be looked at more as art as opposed to here's a naked man. I wanted them to look almost like statues.
There's another thing that I noticed and that you've talked about is that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just because of these are the men that were open enough to participate in your shoots, but there seems to be more of a focus on gay men. Is that done on purpose, or have you also shot straight subjects? I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
The ratio was probably 95% gay or bi, and I did have the occasional straight man pose for me. I don't know why, but I found it easier for a gay man to say yes to doing this than a straight man. And because I am gay, I see my generation, the generation before me, possibly the generation after me, suffer with issues of body acceptance. I see it. I talk to people. This is even before doing the project. And again, not everybody has body issues. And I will say this, when I threw myself into studying different healing modalities and learning about mindful meditation and Kabbalah, a good friend of mine who took some of these courses with me, when we were finished one particular course, she turned to me and said, she was like, you need to go heal your community. That's what you need to do. And I said, well, how the f am I going to heal my community? Fast forward, probably within a year or two of being of photographing this series, it dawned on me. I remembered what she had said. I said, I guess I am doing that to a degree, a little bit, The majority of men I am photographing are gay or bi, and we all have a story. So I thought, oh, I guess maybe I am doing that in a way.
Yeah, I can tell that you approach your work with care and sensitivity,
Hmm.
and you can really see the grace and vulnerability in your work.
Thank you.
What I love about your choices as well and how you've captured these images is you essentially invite the models to move in a way that accentuate their folds. And I thought
Hmm.
that to be really interesting.
I guess I'm partly responsible for that, but that's really up to the gentleman in front of the camera. Because when they come on set, I give direction. So I explain like, this is your light source. You can face me, your back could be towards me. You could, you can look anywhere you like, you can look at me, you don't have to look at me at all. What was really important was hand placement, how their face looked, if they pointed their toes, and the lines of the body were really important. So I said, you need really, if you're going to move, exaggerate the movement. If somebody came in and they happened to be obese, I wasn't trying to accentuate that. That's just how the man looks. But I wanted there to be something really interesting in the movement of the person. So if there were folds, I wasn't choosing images specifically for that. I chose images because they just talk to me.
But I think it's also a really good thing, right? Because,
Mm,
we tend to, as a society, try to hide those things,
yes.
right? We try to hide the fact that maybe we have a little bit of a gut or whatever. And so the fact that through these movements and what you've been able to capture on film shows men as they are unabashedly in their full beauty is really powerful.
Thank you. I've held on to these images, kept them really close to my chest. And again, this whole series, I didn't expect it to be running this long, though there was a 2-year window where nothing was happening because of lockdowns. But it just kept growing organically. So I've kept the images close to my chest because I didn't want them to be just content. And I try to be as respectful as I can to everyone who posed for this. So when I started promoting the book this past summer, and the lead up to the book, I actually posted actual photos from the book, and there was maybe 10 or 12 images that I posted. So I had copy written over the images as well, inspirational memes, I guess. But anything you see where it's just cropped and the person is just kind of standing there, those were just as steps on set. I explain what I need, and then I do my focus, and that's the shot of everyone just kind of people just standing there still. And I'm using those on my social media because I don't want to give away the movement photos, but I've only really put out again 10 or 12 of those. So the images that you're seeing, I appreciate your words and your kind words, but a lot of the images that you're seeing aren't even in the book. And the thing too is if you look at a particular image and you're drawn to it, which is amazing, but to see the collection of images together of this whole group of men, the whole concept is when you look at the whole story of this whole collection of images. So,
You say the word story, and it's very much about their story. It's more than just their bodies. And so, one of the things I heard you say at a podcast is that men get emotional and you get
hmm,
emotional.
hmm.
So, what is it about the vulnerability of revealing ourselves that brings emotions to the surface?
First of all, coming to a shoot like this, you're stepping out of your box. I tell them, I said, I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to think like, am I doing this right? Does he like what I'm doing? Does he like the moves I'm making? Is he getting the photograph? Oh my God, I probably look terrible. Because I would have those thoughts. So I just said, please disregard those thoughts. If you're having them, disregard them. The fact that you're here is amazing. I need one really beautiful photograph from you. If you can give me 40, that's amazing as well. So when they start moving, what I tend to do is I stop them a few times through the session and I bring them over and then have them look at the laptop and I'll go through the shots with them. And I'm pointing out in the photographs, look at your leg placement here. It's really, really beautiful. See how you pointed your toe? And I'm trying to have them see their image the way I'm seeing their image, as opposed to them walking up and like, oh my God, my love handles. Oh my God, look at my stomach, how big my stomach is. Because that's what we would do. And so for them to like kind of let that go and really see what I'm seeing, then once they go back to set, they kind of change a little bit. And every time I stop them and I bring them over to look, they go back and it just keeps getting better and better. And I play music, so I usually let them have their choice of what they want to move to. And sometimes I will pick the music myself. And again, there was a handful of times where I would get, I'm an emotional person anyway. I'll cry at a commercial sometimes. Like that's just me. I'll be there and I'm just like, I'm so grateful that I'm able to witness this person do this. They've stepped out of their box, they're on set, but once they've stepped out of that box, like you get out of the fuckery out of your mind and you're there and you're just in the moment and you're moving, it's really powerful. And that's happened a few times.
Is that the healing?
Well, I'm not saying that by doing this you're going to be healed.
No, I'm speaking from a metaphorical perspective, right? Because you did say that you had a friend who had been alongside you during your spiritual journey who
Hmm.
said, your job
Mm,
is about healing the community. And so I was just speaking to that. So in that moment where you have a model who is essentially unmasking themselves and being
yes,
free in the
yes.
studio, is that the healing?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess that would be it. I also found that I've kept in touch with a lot of these people and they've kept in touch with me since working together. And if I follow them on their social media, I could see their progress just in the way they present themselves after that. It may take 6 months to a year, but I'll see it. I see a change where they looked this way before, but now they're presenting a little bit differently. A handful of men seem to have gone on fitness journeys afterwards. I had one gentleman and he was so fit. And he messaged me after the shoot. This was in London. And he's like, I just want to say I'm going to join a yoga class because I couldn't move the way I thought I could move. Just little things. It affected them differently in little ways. Someone would come in crying, like they would walk in crying. They would cry on set, and some would leave crying. Not everybody, but some would. Depending on where I would be shooting, I would usually have a meet and greet person. So they're seeing men come in and they're signing off the releases and things like that. But they would see men come in being extremely nervous. Some men would get to the door, walk in, and turn around and leave. They wouldn't even wait and contemplate. They were just like, I can't. Someone get to the door, touch the door. They've told me, they've messaged me after I got to the door, I touched the door handle, and I'm like, I can't do this, and they would leave. But the men who stayed they would see them nervous. I mean, it's you have to imagine you're coming in and you're taking off all your clothes and you're being raw. You have no control, which is interesting nowadays because with social media, it's all about control. It's all about curating the way you look, the way you present yourself, right? So now you have no control here. And then they leave the area and they come into set. We do our session. It was in London. It was a very good friend of mine, and he was the meet and greet. He's a lovely guy. And afterwards, like, what is going on in there? And I said, why? He's like, because I'm seeing them one way, and then they go in and they come out, and they're like, they've kind of like shed a skin almost, and they're like relaxed. And like, okay, thanks so much. And they would leave. Right? He's like, what's happening in there? I'm like, nothing's happening, but something's happening to them, I guess. So,
Well, it's definitely having a positive impact on them, and you're also having a positive impact on the wider community. You've photographed around 500 men for this project. Why do you think there's been such a positive impact to this idea worldwide?
well, one, I think this came off the heels of the Me Too movement. It was terrible what happened, but it doesn't mean that all men are garbage either. It doesn't mean that all men have toxic masculinity running through them. And I think this was refreshing, and I think men identified with seeing people that looked like them. And also, it's a topic that wasn't never really talked about. Like I even remember hearing Sam Smith talk about how they, struggled with their own body issues and would go online, and there would be nothing there for them to, no resources. And this was already, I was already photographing this at the time. And I said, yeah, I mean, it just validated what my experience with it. So I think it was new. It was something that wasn't really touched on, so which I think drew a lot of eyes to it. And I think maybe men were a little fed up that they were disregarded. And here's a platform, and I'm celebrating them. I'm celebrating men.
You talk about how Arrested movement has evolved. So you started this in 2016, and what started off, as you were saying, as a one person, once off shoot turned into an international cattle call, multi city shoots, touring gallery shows, and now books. I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
You released volume one of
hmm
Arrested Movement this past year in 2024. Can you talk about the book, but also volume two, what other plans you have?
So again, everything was organic. There was no intention for a book ever. There was no intention for any of this. It was just what I had said earlier. And somebody had put it in my head, you should do a book. So that's how that got started. And it's been the hardest thing I think I've ever done. This is probably the longest I've ever worked on something creatively. And I eat, breathed it. I lived it. I slept it. I'm really proud of it. And I'm not being biased, but I think it's really beautiful when you see all the images together. It was really hard to choose images. Initially, I had almost every image in the book, and I had to be pulled aside a few times from the gentleman who designed the book and the actual printers. Like, you can't have this size book. Like, there's no way. It'll be too thick. 700 pages, you can't have that. I'm like, okay. So it was really hard to narrow down. There's some essays from some of the men talking about their experiences. I just wanted it to be an inspiration, like a beacon of hope almost for somebody who's could be young or even somebody who's older who's been struggling. I do stress though in the book that body positivity, you need a balance between mental health, physical health, spiritual health. I can't be body positive and have poor mental health, or be body positive and eat really badly. I've touched on that in the book as well, where there has to be a balance. What really stands out are these men because they all have a story, and it seems that each image is telling an individual story.
Speaking of standing out, have you done a self-portrait for Arrested Movement?
Yep. I figured I had to, number one. I can't ask all these men to do something and then I don't myself. And it was easy. It was really easy to do. If somebody asked me to do this 9, 10 years ago, I probably would have said no. But it was easy to do. It was easy. And I didn't want to actually, I did it because I felt like I needed to. And I didn't want to include it in the book because I didn't want to take up space for somebody else. And I've had a lot of people say, no, 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 you should include it. So I am in the first book. I've also been on my own body acceptance journey since, I was a kid. And this project for me has helped leaps and bounds 100%. And I guess that also comes with age and life experiences as well.
Where are you now with that?
With my
With your body image?
Pretty good. I've always said, you got to love yourself. It's all about love. Like love is a universal thing. And, it makes your journey that much easier just to love yourself. You may want to have an adonis body. You may want to be a bigger person. Everyone has a way of how they perceive themselves to be. So if they're on a journey, they may have started it, they may be halfway. Why wait to love yourself when you've achieved your goal? Love yourself now. It kind of makes the journey a little bit easier. So yeah, I'm there. I'm way past what I used to be. This is me, and you're either going to like me or you're not going to like me. If we're talking about being attracted to somebody, but I'm good with me. As much as I was trying to help other people, I help myself as well.
What does resilience mean to you?
Strength, inner strength that you probably didn't think you had. I've been the soldier and the robot in dark times where I'm just getting up and I'm functioning and I'm trying to get through the day and not realizing that it does take resilience to get up and face the day. Knowing that whatever's going on is going to eventually end one day. Everything always ends. But surviving, I think.
What are your practices of resilience? So, what are the things that you do on a daily basis to help you be more resilient?
Before getting up, I tell my body I love it. I do my prayers. I try to squeeze in a meditation.
So, for those daily practices that you have, how do they benefit you?
They ground me. I try to practice gratitude. An old friend of mine, when you see repetitive numbers on your phone, 1111, some people, they say they're angelic numbers, but this one particular friend said to me, when she sees those, which is something I've adopted, I stop and I list 10 things in my head that I'm grateful for. I'll see repetitive numbers 3 or 4 times a day. So I feel like I'm constantly putting myself in a place of gratitude as opposed to a place of why me. I find for myself that helps a lot.
How can people reach you if they want to contact you, and how can they get their hands on your book?
Well, the book, it was self-published, so there's only a certain amount of copies from volume one. They can reach me through my Instagram at Anthony P. Manieri or at Arrested Movement, through email, anthony@anthonypatrickmanieri.com. There will be some copies left once printing is done and shipped. I didn't do a very big run. A lot of people have been reaching out to me wanting to purchase it.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your project, Arrested Movement. I think it's so important, and I know that it will benefit many men.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again next week for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.